On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and Billy Higgins, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my jazz heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome, everybody, inside the Blackwood Broadcasting Studios at an undisclosed Institute of Higher Learning. This is The Jake Feinberg Show, and we're happy to have all of you along with us today. In the 21st century, the so-called digital age, the role of the producer and the musician has devolved into a potpourri of inanimate objects, the number of records you sell, how to make a hit, the drum machine, and a shrinking, more rigid music industry. It's a far cry from when my guests first happened on the scene. From this host's perspective, idioms were less important than individuality. Enclaves of regional music crossed the Great Divide from Arkansas to Toronto. Leadership was defined as getting out of the way and letting the wolf howl, or letting the music play the band. This thesis is backed up by experimentation that went on within the record industry. My guest was involved as a producer and player with Bob Dylan, The Band, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Seals and Crofts, Taj Mahal, and Paul Simon. He came from a classical background with an understanding of how to fuse players who had chops to play across the entire musical spectrum. He did this as a producer, arranger, songwriter, and composer. It was a Woodstock and post-Woodstock mentality that led my guest to his own LPs that are a mix of spoken word, riddles, swing, and chance-taking, a mix and match of local artists in residence and the hippest of New York studio cats. My guest records have held up through the years and, like strawberry wine, have gotten better with age. I spent the entire Christmas break dancing in a land of sunshine with no inclination to go. He continues to create in his own way and is about to embark on a live tour, including a trip to Ellenville, New York, and then to Joe's Pub in New York City on April 25th. King Harvest has surely come. John Simon, welcome to The Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake. What a nice introduction. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome, my friend. It's an honor to talk to you.
Yeah, you said a couple of my buzzwords, and they really got my dander up, which is drum machine. And I've been doing this sort of rock and roll. I call it my rock talk. Sometimes it's called rock and roll, its origins and consequences. And it's an illustrated talk with, examples and slides. And I talk about the development of rock and roll and how disco led to one of the worst things in the world, which was drum machine, because, here's disco, and you'd have a drummer in the studio whose right calf turned about the size of a grapefruit from playing the 4 beats steady for 15 minutes straight, and somebody invented the drum machine, which freed him up, but it just destroyed the beat, because the beat is something that players share a responsibility for and have respect for. I mean, while you're playing music, you're aware of the beat and you're aware of how you contribute to the beat, and the beat's a living thing. It speeds up a little as you anticipate the bridge coming, and it slows down after a solo and things like that, But with the drum machine, it's just mechanical, and there's no soul to it. And so people, instead of playing with each other, start playing with the machine, and it's that more the cocoonization of art, and I'm just, oh man, I've never used a drum machine or a click track in a studio recording. I never, ever, and I never will. Sometimes people say, oh, we need a click track to be steady. Well, if you're not steady, you shouldn't be in the recording studio,
No, I mean, I was born in 1978. And I didn't get through. It's one reason I'm just so excited to have you on the program, because you know,
I was already dead by 1978.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. But still in this world. The thing is, the thing about the drum track, and I've talked to a lot of studio jazzers or guys that were playing at the Village Gate, and you know, just the idea that, you know, Tony Williams, I mean, he would play multiple, you know, beats within the, you know, it wasn't about perfection. That's the point. It drives me insane. I don't mind. Like, I mean, listen, artists have, you know, you want to make sure that you are putting out a product that you can live with. But at the same time, the authenticity of when you came of age, it was really about human people playing and listening. Most importantly, listening to one another. You listen to Levon Helm play the drums. I've been listening to Big Pink and the band album. I mean, Howard Johnson said it best. I mean, the guy had the most unique style. You can't do that. You can't replicate that with a machine. Mm-hmm. And so that, you know, like I said, I wonder how you look at it as as the albums that you have become very famous for continue to grow, you know, the authenticity there. You must feel good about that. But I'm curious as to how you feel about your current artistry and how you fit into whatever music scene there is today.
Well, I don't. That's the answer to that. I don't fit in the only authenticity you'll find today are in live shows, and even that, you know, you'll with a big extravaganza, some pop stars dancing at the same time that they're singing. They might all be all pre-recorded, and they're certainly hearing a click track in their headphones. You know, when a drummer knocks his sticks together with one of these big pop bands, it goes click, click, click. He's not making up that beat. That's the beat that he's hearing in his click track in his phones, you know. Mm-hmm. And that's terrible, you know. And this idea of, you know, you're right, perfection is there are limits to the value of perfection. I mean, pitch correction is another machine that's ridiculous too, that you can take any singer, no matter how bad they are, and put this pitch correction machine on them, and they sound, you know, like James Taylor sounds on the Natch.
Exactly. No, Emil Richards of another Connecticut. Did you know Emil at all?
He used to be a music copyist, that Emil Richards?
Emil was with the Hartford, oh boy, I can't remember what orchestra, but then he went out to California and became this...
Oh, yeah, percussionist.
Yeah, big percussionist. And a Connecticut...
Yeah, he played on my very first album. There was a song called Railroad Train Running Up My Back, and Emil said, you know, I can make a train sound. And he had two drumsticks, and he had cut notches in one of them and put it on his snare with the notches up. And then ran the other stick over those notches and went like that. It was great, you know.
You know, the thing about him, the reason I bring him up is when I went to, my buddy Raphael and I went on a kind of a pilgrimage to Southern California to promote a jazz concert a couple years ago, and we visited Emil in Lake Toluca, and he was talking about a singer, the pitch correction. You know, she would sing a song and then she'd yell upstairs, "How did I sound?" And the guy's like, "Terrible! Come up, we'll fix it." You know, and it's it's a far cry from the I don't want to use the word indigenous, but just the idea of the efforts that were going into whatever it was, you know, all the work within the studio and the creative input and the sharing that you had going on when you first, you know, came on the scene. And I wanted to ask you, actually, could you talk about the music and the record industry of the early 1960s? What was it kind of vapid in your mind? I mean, before you got into Columbia, where did the industry and where did the music, what was it like at that time?
That's a long question.
Take your time.
Okay. Let's see. Well, maybe I can just do it best by describing what a recording session was like, as opposed to, you know, come on up here and we'll fix it. Mm-hmm. It was all about pre-production, not post-production. When we did the band's Big Pink album, for instance, we took every song and said, well, how can we better this song? How can we better this section? What's appropriate for this section? How do these instruments fit together? You know, how do the voices fit? And let's get it so we can play it great. And then once we got it so we can play it great, we just practice it over and over and over and over again. And then we're ready to roll the tape. But that doesn't seem to be. I mean, I spent too much time in recording studios with bands who didn't have it together and who spent time in front of the microphone, wasting everyone's money and time while they practiced. So it was all about pre-production and not post-production then.
Was that something that you? There were only certain cats that, I mean, you really had this beautiful stable of relationships between, like I said, the urban studio cats from the city, and then also the sort of the local enclaves like up in Woodstock. I mean, were there musicians that were also kind of obsessed with post-production, or was everybody kind of more into the pre-production stage, or was it really?
It depends on the individual, and some people can use it really well. Like here's a musician, Mike Maneri, who used to live in New York and then eventually moved to Woodstock.
Sure.
He found some technological thing where he could vary the pitch on his vibes. Now that's a very far out thing, and it was sort of mind blowing, And but he used it in a musical way, like he used it on the Michael Frank's album. He played a couple tunes where he, at the end of the tune, the vibes go and pitch wise, not volume wise, And that's so it depends on the individual. Some people, and I can think of another Woodstock person, Pete Levin, who uses a synthesizer very, very musically, not as something that'll facsimilate other instruments, but as a sound on its own, So it depends on the individual, and some people live in this modern age, like me, and don't go for that at all. I mean, when I go to play someplace, like I've been playing with Taj, Taj's tuba band. We just mentioned Howard Johnson earlier. I've been playing with that tuba band ever since it started, and Taj has scheduled a few reunion gigs, and the equipment manager, the Rose manager, or the whatever will call me up and say, "What kind of instrument would you like?" And I say, "I don't know." They say, "Do you want a Korg this, or a Roland this, or a Yamaha this, or a Casio that?" I say, "I don't know," and and so I'll have to go there and try out what they've got and see what sounds most like something I can deal with. And first, I mean, I won't use anything it's got to have a weighted keyboard for one thing. I mean, most of the synthesizers have that feathery organ keyboard touch to them.
Right.
I like to feel something. I like to be able to push something down and hear something come back. So.
And I wanted to ask you actually. I have a couple buddies that have tickets for the Joe's Pub show, and I think that it's going to be. I just want to know, when I first contacted you, you said you were kind of up to your ears in all sorts of work and a little bit, but you were, in some ways you were also evolving too. And I'm curious, do you have any expectations going into these concerts?
Well, here's what happened. First of all, when you mentioned a trip to Ellenville, New York, that's not a long trip for me. I live right near there.
Oh, we're going to get into that later. Don't worry about that.
Well, that's okay. But I've been playing mostly the Great American Songbook with the jazz trio.
Mm-hmm.
Just not producing anything, not doing my own songs, but just every week I'd bring in one or two new arrangements, so that keeps my creative juices going, and I'm getting my chops better as a piano player. So there I am in Ellenville, New York, doing that, and I became involved with the Actors Equity Theater there, called the Shadowland Theater, a professional theater company, and they invited me to join the board, and I did, and at one of the meetings they said, well, we have this empty theater, and when we're not putting on plays, we ought to use it for something. I wish we had some lectures, somebody who could talk about something. So I just sort of half muttered, well, I could talk about my life in rock and roll. All the heads spun toward me, and before I knew it, I was committed to do this, okay? So I did it last April, a year ago. And then I get emails every once in a while from, fans or people with questions, and most of them come from people who have other jobs. They're truck drivers or housewives or insurance salesmen or whatever. But this guy said, I missed your rock and roll talk at the Shadowland Theater in Ellenville, and I'm a fan. If there's anything I can do for you, I'd love to. I'm a manager. Aha!
Wow.
This is not somebody who's out of business. This is somebody very much in the business. And it turned out Andrew Ganger, who turned out to be a very nice and with it guy, young man who manages a lot of groups for a big agency, he said, what do you want to do? And I gave him a whole list of things I wanted to do, from a Carnegie Hall concert down to playing in people's living rooms, whatever level you want to take it at. He said, well, how about we start with Joe's Pub? And how about we start with you doing a concert that's half rock and roll talk and half doing your tunes? So that's what I've been doing for the past about 3 months, is trying to put together a cohesive show that has a through line and where I can work the songs in without them being obtrusive, and keep it fun, and then memorize the sucker too, which is not easy. I can memorize songs, that's fine, but my wife Cece is an actress and a writer, and so she said, you got to get and she's also very funny, so she said, you got to get your act together, and here's what we're going to say, and we kept trying things. She said, well, you got to deliver the line this way, not that way, and so you got to memorize the whole deal. So that's what I'm doing.
It's really interesting that you bring that up. So there is like an educational component to it, where you talk about stories or history of your career. Is that fair?
Yeah. There are two ways. I mean, I can talk about my crazy theories, which I find very interesting. Some people find interesting, but most of the people will just want to hear stories about the people that they think I got to know, and that they like to know better through some stories. That's about it.
Well, I mean, for me, this mission that I'm on it's about the people. There's no doubt about it, but it's also about the sociological factors, the regionalism of the pockets that had existed in this country before we became all interconnected.
Oh, you said it.
And I'm very much interested in the theories, and quite honestly, I think that is more important at these live shows, because I think I know for a fact that one of the guys that's going to your show is a younger musician and very dedicated guy and very wholesome, and wanting to and to know the outside, beyond the music, how this stuff came together is absolutely essential for building bridges if there is a future. I mean, if there's going to be a future, it's going to come from your generation. That's why I've pursued you guys. And I just think that those theories, more so, I mean, listen, I think it's a trip that, you shared a driveway with Bob Dylan, but it's like, I'm much more interested in John Simon, sort of the walking into Columbia, and you're in this middle of this maelstrom of a hotbed of activity that was going on in New York at that time, and a company that was sort of could go either way. But just all the sociological stuff. What was Columbia like? Could you, the Upper West Side of New York, talk about that when you first got there? The kind of electric, was it an electric feel? Was it, or is it my fantasy? Talk about what it was like there.
Okay. It's interesting. Your questions, you're like Charlie Rose. Your questions are so long, they have about 4 questions within each one. So I have to take some notes and say, I have to answer that, then answer that, then answer that. First of all, let's get back to Columbia in a second, because that was in your last question as well, and I didn't answer it. But the sociological change that results from music is interesting. Like, Janis Joplin, as much as she was an exceptional performer, was incredibly important in the liberation of the less than picture perfect woman in the arts. Let me just put it that way. If you look at the chick singers from the 50s and the early 60s, they all look like they're all done up and perfect looking, and the Janis just was totally herself.
Right, exactly.
And that was in a period of women's lib, and people were encouraged by Germaine Greer and everybody else to be totally themselves women. So that was it's all part of the same fabric, And then go back to this another thing I was going to mention, but I'll skip to Columbia Records here. I was very, very proud to be on staff at Columbia Records. I joined them in 1963 when I graduated from college. And it was a very distinguished company, because the president of the company was Goddard Lieberson, that's a distinguished-sounding name in the first place, but he was a very erudite, classy guy who was a composer as well as being a record company executive, and a pal of John Hammond Sr., John Hammond's, and a pal, and one of the very early recording business pioneers whose tastes were quite Catholic, where he went across from blues to classical music to jazz to folk music and everything. But there wasn't there was no rock and roll really to speak of at Columbia Records at the time, and that was fine with me because I've never been a fan of rock and roll. And but there I was. I joined this company, and it was great. I mean, I can use a word I never use, marvelous, because it was that kind of classy.
Wow, that's
marvelous.
Cool.
Yeah, and there was even the producers were legendary. I mean, Mitch Miller was there. Tio Macero was a jazz producer there. It was incredible, and the roster was the top. I mean, it was either Columbia Records or RCA were the two big companies, and out in California, Capitol Records. But it was really, really the class outfit. And then the Beatles came along, and the Beatles. There was no rock and roll on Columbia. The first rock and roll that happened might have been attributable to Tom Wilson, who was a wonderful guy. He was a Harvard-educated African-American guy with a great sense of humor who did he work for? Bobby Shad at Mainstream or somebody like that first. I forget quite who he came in with. Then he joined Columbia Records, and he took Simon and Garfunkel's Sounds of Silence, one of those songs, and while Paul was busking in London trying to make a buck on the street, he took that record and added drums and bass and electric guitar to it, and it became a folk rock hit, and Paul Simon had to come back from London, and all of a sudden he was a star, and Simon and Garfunkel had a career, and you know the rest. And that may have been the first rock record for Columbia. I can't be sure about this. I know the first rock group that they signed was Paul Revere and the Raiders, and then there were then after that Gary Usher was producing the Byrds, or Terry Melcher, I guess Doris Day's son, was producing the Byrds. I'm not sure about these details in L.A. for Columbia, but that was just the very beginning of rock and roll. And then came the Monterey Pop Festival, and that's where Janis Joplin was signed to the label. And after that, the label started getting much more rocky.
You know, you brought up, I had this guy's name written down because I'm totally obsessed with him, and I think he was one of the most amazingly innovative guys, especially when it came to continuing the spectrum of the blues. I hate to use the word idioms, but blues and jazz was Bob Shad. And I'm curious as to your relationship with that cat.
I had no relationship with him at all. The only I just had some albums.
I thought he was involved with Janis Joplin in some.
Well, he owned Janis Joplin's contract,
right.
And Columbia had to buy Bobby Shad out for $1 million, whatever it took, to get her contract.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. But at the pop festival there, is that where you met Howard Alk?
I met Howard because shortly after that. Okay, I get a call from Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary, or either from him or through his intermediary, that I was recommended to him to help him with the music for this documentary he was making called You Are What You Eat. I was recommended by Ed Kleban, who wrote the lyrics to Chorus Line, who was at that time one of my co-producers at Columbia Records and probably my best friend at the time. We used to go out and play tennis together and things like that. So then we went back to actually I met him at Monterey Pop. I flew up Peter. They had money. They were on their way to Japan, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and they were stopping at the San Francisco airport. And they had money, so they paid for a plane, or Peter paid for a plane, a little one-engine plane, to take me up to the VIP lounge of United Airlines in San Francisco airport to meet him. And the only thing I had with me to play for him was an album I did, was very Dadaistic, based on Marshall McLuhan's Medium is the Massage album. And he thought that was pretty funny and thought it was okay and took a shot with me. And the next thing was when he got back from Japan and I got finished with whatever I was doing, was to go up to Woodstock and meet with him. And that's when I met Howard Alk. And Howard was the editor, and Howard and I were locked in this, we were free to move, but we were living in this house that Peter rented in Woodstock with cans and cans of old celluloid film and movieolas, trying to make a movie out of this raw footage that Peter and Mary's ex-husband, Barry Feinstein, a photographer, had shot. They started out to do a documentary on the Hells Angels, but while they were doing it, the Summer of Love happened, and it turned into not a documentary, it turned into a mess of a bunch of footage, with the love-ins and everything else in it, and we had to make a movie out of it. So
and you also there was some I remember reading the album you mentioned just before has an interesting name to it. The one that you showed him in the San
Medium is the Massage.
Yeah, that is something I have not been able to hear, but it sounds. Could you talk to my audience? Was that the one with the McCarthy tapes or the quotes from McCarthy?
No, that's one called Point of Order, which was. Point of Order was just a documentary taken from the films of the Army McCarthy hearing, and that's just a straight-ahead documentary and pretty interesting, too. Historically interesting. But Marshall McLuhan was a media guru in the 60s. He was Madison Avenue's god, and a professor at Fordham, and very astute and scholarly. But he had these theories that really have held water about hot and cold idioms, how TV is a hot idiom. You don't want to touch it because it supplies everything to you, whereas radio is a cool idiom because you can supply the pictures that go along with the words, things like that. So he published this paperback book called The Medium is the Massage. He was also fond of punning. And somebody came into my office, a fellow named Jerry Agel, who was a friend of McLuhan's and McLuhan's collaborator on the book, Quentin Fiore, and said, let's make a record of this. And so I went to the president of Columbia Records, who by that time was Clive Davis, and said, how about this? And Clive was always into taking advantage of things that were popular and, riding a bandwagon that way. So I'm not saying that in a pejorative way.
Okay, I never knew Clive. I just know that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so mostly Jerry Agel, he's mostly the writer of this thing, excerpted things from the book, and the book is full of quotes from James Joyce and from New Guinea natives and whoever else. It was just full of stuff, very rich book, and you can still get it from Amazon. It's a paperback called The Medium is the Massage. And we went in there, and we had Marshall come in and read some, and then we had a couple of character actors who could do voices like crazy, Bob McFadden and Brenna Rayburn, who could do tons of voices. And we had a couple of sound effects men from the radio. And then we had I put together a score. I had fun, just doing music for it. And then we edited it together all crazy. And so it's like this, like I say, Dada. It isn't very linear. It's just which should appeal to the people in the digital age today. It's just you grab a fact here, grab a fact there. It isn't logical or linear.
Now I want to read this because I was a record website that I love so much that's helped me on this journey. It says, "The Medium is the Massage," McLuhan's important 1967 book co-written with Quentin Fiore, and represent here as a wild sound collage that blends together music, sounds, media snippets, and readings by McLuhan, Fiore, and a host of other voices. It says, genius that comes from Jerome Agel, who put the whole project together and delivered it to the loving hands of John Simon, who produced some other wonderful records of this nature for late 60s Columbia. A real delight throughout, and the kind of an album we wish people still kept making. So I think you're right. Whoa. That just sort of backed up what you just said.
Whoa. Well, first of all, it's hard listening. Taj Mahal told me when he first heard it, he would listen to the left side all the way through, then he'd go back and listen to the right side all the way through because it's thick. It's really thick. And this reissue from, by the way, the Japanese really love John Simon because they reissue a ton of your stuff. It's this great reissue package in a gatefold LP styled sleeve with additional artwork, rare photos, full notes on the sessions, and more. I got to get this album immediately. That's great. Yeah. They actually went through and transcribed every word. The Japanese did transcribe every single word from this record, which I tell you is thick with verbiage. They went in there and got it all. I don't know how accurate they got it, but they got most of it.
So I'm curious about this. Obviously, the Summer of Love, you had Woodstock, and then was it just the idea that because the concert happened there and because it was a big statement, people said, well, this is kind of an enclave, one of these regional areas that is going to be a nice place to settle for. The list goes on and on. Jeff Moldauer, even Chuck Rainey and Bernard Purdy considered buying property up there. And it's like, I'm just saying to myself, what was the catalyst, the concert, or how did Woodstock become this haven?
Okay, we go back once again to Peter Yarrow. Peter Yarrow grew up there because his mother, Verna, was an artist, and the New York School of Art, or one of the art schools in New York had its summer sessions in Woodstock. So Peter spent his summers there all the time. And Peter was managed by Albert Grossman, who had a club in Chicago called the Gate of Horn. And once Peter, Paul, and Mary became successful, and he had a couple other acts, Odetta, Richie Havens, Ian and Sylvia, etc. He had a really good stable. He realized he'd have to move somewhere close to New York City, and so Peter recommended Woodstock. So Albert moved to Woodstock. Then Albert started to manage Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan asked Albert, where should I live? Albert said, Woodstock. Then other acts, people who played, well, it mostly came through Albert. Other acts of Jeff and Maria Moldauer came through Albert. And other musicians that played with Bob and played around, in that group started coming to Woodstock. And then the Woodstock Festival happened way after that, much later.
Interesting.
Much later. And when was it, 67 or something like that? No, 69. Or 70, I think, 69 or 70.
Right.
Anyway, so then they wanted to have the Woodstock Festival in Woodstock itself, but the town board wouldn't allow it because they realized how many people were going to be there. And so they had it about an hour and a half away, and still had the name Woodstock, and of course it became a brand at that point. But they're two separate things. I mean, after the Woodstock Festival happened, then every kid with a guitar would get off the Trailways bus at the green in Woodstock and look around, balefully for something. Usually get disappointed or leave or end up, doing carpentry or whatever. But then the other level are the Bernard Purdys and the Chuck Raineys and the Mike Mineris and the Jack DeJohnetts and the Don Byrons and everybody else who showed up there.
Dave Holland.
Dave Holland. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a place that's friendly to music, friendly to crazy people, just receptive, very receptive. And if you're weird or kooky, that's okay. It's a lot like Greenwich Village, but with trees.
And it's funny that you said that because I spent roughly 2 years of my life at a summer camp in upstate New York next to Ellenville in Elizaville called Scatico. And it had a deli, a post office, and a fire station. And and then there was this big camp, 8-week Jewish summer camp, boys' side, girls' side, one visiting day. It absolutely made me who I was because you could come from any walk of life, really, and be, you may not necessarily have be the most popular kid or the biggest jock, but you could go to Scatico and you could find your identity. And it was extremely important. But the thing is, the surroundings were also magical. And it was just a situation where I say to myself, gosh, when you guys were, whether it was your own albums or whether it was in pre-production with the band or Dylan, how much of the writing and the sort of the flow came from the imagery. That's what I'm kind of trying to get at, is the idea that it was for crazy people with trees. So how much did you get? How much is it visceral from?
Oh, it's got to be. It is. Everybody was up there writes at least one peaceful country song, and it's just that city angst is not happening. It's very, very laid back and relaxed. And at the same time, it's very vital and alive because you're right in with nature. I mean, you see the seasons very strongly up there in New England, and it's essentially New England climate, And, I'm in Florida right now because I'm old enough where I've seen enough winters in my life.
I want to get you out of there, though. I don't like Florida at all.
Well, I'm in the part of Florida, like I'm in the Keys, which is like 1940. I feel like I'm in a Humphrey Bogart movie down here.
All right, well, listen, we got a lot of music to play, so I wanted to put this track in and we'll come back and talk about it, okay?
Okay, sure, yeah.
She reads the leaves and she leads the life that she learned so well from the old wife. It's so strange to arrange it. You know I wouldn't change it, but hear me if you're near me. Can I just rearrange it? The watchman covers me with his remedy. I can't see, it's hard to feel. I think his magic might be real. I can't get to you from your dark gate. No, it's always locked by the magistrate. Not who don't care why you cry. You know he thinks it's just a lie to get out. I don't doubt that you'd make a try. If the good times get you through, I know the dogs won't bother you. We'll be gone in moonshine time. I got a place they'll never find. You know I do believe in your hexagram. But can you tell me how they all knew the plan? Did you trip or slip on their gifts? You know we're just a con. You knew it. Why'd you do it? I've been hiding in the dawn. Now I must be on my way. I guess you really have to stay inside the mission down in Modoc, Arkansas.
Caledonia Mission.
Yes, indeed.
And that's John Simon on piano as well. Which,
how did you find that out?
you know, there's a great website dedicated to the band, and they literally go through each album and they tell you. I mean, you're playing baritone sax on. I think it's one song on this album. Sometimes electric piano.
No, that's fine. They get history all wrong. I can't play the saxophone. It's a baritone horn.
Baritone horn, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And the tuba, and it was hard to it was hard to listening through these albums. It's funny because there's this great picture in the Brown album where all the guys are, you know, Richard and Levon and Rick and Robbie and Garth. They're all playing, and then you see the soundboard. And then I think it's your feet on the soundboard.
That's it. That's right.
And I'm like, this is classic. And I just say this is important. You know, when you heard their music, it was so unique. But from your ears as a producer, talk about what you first heard and how you thought you could help them.
Well, I'm, I help in a couple of ways. First of all, I'm pretty organized as a person, so as a foreman, a job foreman, I can keep things focused and going in one direction. That's the way I just do things with everything. But music, it's just musically. I've got, if I heard any things that were mistakes, things, notes that clashed in a chord, that I could catch all those things. If the, rhythm got off right like that, those are all the negative, catching all the problems. But as far as what I can contribute the other way, I don't know. I guess I had my ideas. I mean, it's hard to. to know what we worked so closely together. It's hard to know what came from what, except that and later on people will tell me, like Robbie told me once that in Tears of Rage, where it goes dum da dum dum boom da 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 dum, that where I said boom, that accent in the fourth beat, he said that was mine, and that figures because I sort of like that rhythm anyway, and but and it's like everything gets filtered through a producer, and so everything was sort of filtered through me. And if I liked a song, I'd say, boy, I like that song. If I didn't like a song, I'd go, we can, take another look at that song. Let's maybe fix it up and see what we can do to it, or scrap it, or what else you got, So that's all what it is mostly. And with the band, I was a little more hands-on because we had the luxury on the second album, and actually on the second half of the first album and the second album, we had the luxury of free time in the studio. We could take as long as we wanted. So instead of doing pre-production outside of a studio in rehearsal, we could actually do it in the studio. So I had a lot of hands-on time, learning all the chords for the song and figuring out parts and for myself, so that whenever a question came up, or I could get my opinion in, and I'm an opinionated person, then I could do that, So.
But I mean, so you met them. I guess I really want you to try to define when you first heard them. They hadn't even settled on the name of the band yet, and but was it as simple to say that it was this Canadian fusion of Mississippi Delta with Canadian music, and what was just so unique? I just think that
there's no Canadian music. What's Canadian music?
Well, I mean,
they don't even have Tie Me Kangaroo Down, Jack. Or they don't even, like Australia has music. What Canadian music is there?
It's just that those guys came from there. That's all I say.
Yeah, that's all. It's just a part of America.
But did they pursued you pretty seriously to come in, and what were the things that I
don't know if they pursued me. Robbie's a cagey guy. He pretty much had control of the thing and got people to do whatever he needed them to do. Is pretty much this version of the Hawks, which is what they were in the first place, was essentially Robbie's version, which is one of the things that led to their ultimate breakup between him and Levon. Because it was Levon's version for a while, and so they didn't come seeking me. He didn't come seeking me. I don't think so. I mean, except that they had already done a session with this band on their own for a Motown producer whose name escapes me right now, but I used to know it, and it didn't turn out so well. So I don't know who suggested, whether Howard Hawks suggested me to them or Albert or what, but. There it was, and we hit it off just fine. We had a good time together, So.
Yeah, looking back on that, I mean, do you, those guys were really, in their beginning stages, and it's amazing to me that this album, or these most notably Big Pink and the Brown album, continue to really grow in popularity, and it speaks. I just wonder how, as a producer, as an artist, as somebody who's a bit of a perfectionist, how you look back on these albums and your contributions to them, and if you if it's still satisfying or more satisfying than it was then.
Oh, it's great. It was great to hear Caledonia Mission then. It's just wonderful to hear Rick singing the lead and Richard on top and Levon come in the end, and it was wonderful. And I love a lot of those things. I mean, as far as my contribution, when I played piano on that one, I played piano on King Harvest, and I played piano on The Last Waltz for Van Morrison stuff. But that's only piano playing I ever did for the band. And then Garth and I did all the horns together, and that's about it. But Robbie learned a lot from Bob Dylan in his songwriting. His songwriting before and after Bob is pretty different, and and the thing about it was they were all so incredibly gifted, and they were a band long before they hit a recording studio. They recorded a little bit with Ronnie Hawkins, but before they started doing albums on their own, they were already a band, and they were all just great players and great singers. So what more could you ask for? You know?
No, I mean, and being sort of a preservation of cultural heritage, I like to find out, you had free studio time, but I mean, was like during some downtime, were you in coffee shops with Billy Mundy, or was Levon Shop in Wood? I just kind of want to get a feel of like what.
I thought you didn't want that stuff.
Oh, I love that. This is what my generation lives on, because you can't necessarily.
We did everything. We did everything that any human beings would do in life. We just did. Well, one nice thing about Woodstock back in those days, it wasn't so popular as it is now, and you used to be able just to drop in on somebody without calling up ahead of time and say, "Hey, can I come over?" So there was a lot of that happening. You just say, "Well, I think I'll go and see Levon." So you just get in the car and go over there and knock on the door, and if he opens the door, yes. If not, he's sleeping or something, and then you go see somebody else. I mean, it's just the way things were. And there's a lot of trading of music around, and a lot of pot smoking, and pretty harmless stuff.
Exactly. No, and did you? I'm trying to figure this out, because I know you were involved with the Last Waltz, but did you wind up at Shangri-La with them too?
No, we used Shangri-La as a rehearsal studio for the Last Waltz. That's all for the concerts.
I wonder,
and I did an album there with Herth Martinez too, but that was it.
And because at that time there was a guy that kind of vexing guy was Richard Manua, and the story is that he was living in a boathouse with basically lighting kerosene and eating hamburgers. It just seemed like there was a gradual, as with most bands, they kind of, the fabric started to come apart. And my question is, when you were working with the Last Waltz, how directly involved were you, and how was it was it harder to deal with, because the tensions were pretty high, especially between Robbie and Levon at that time?
No, because I was the musical supervisor of the concert. I mean, I pretty much ran the show for the Last Waltz, so it was not hard to deal with people at all. I was a general and everyone else were soldiers, so that was easy.
That's great. I would love to see you as a general. No, I was going to say, so you were the one that brought in Snooky Young and Joe Fair.
I didn't bring in anybody. I just ran the thing. As far as bringing in those particular players, probably Garth picked the players and maybe talked to me about it. But there were rehearsals. There was everyone came down to Shangri-La ahead of time, those that could, and we worked on things like Joni Mitchell shows up and starts playing a song that they're going to play, and I can. The guys in the band didn't read music except for Garth, and Joni has some pretty weird chords in some of her songs, but I could usually look at a guitar player's left hand and figure out what the chords were. And I said to Joni, I can't figure out what those chords are. She says, yeah, well, I always, when I want to write a new song, sometimes I just tune my guitar randomly to something to make myself stupid. I remember she said that. I'll never forget that line, So I'm getting beeped. How rude.
Yeah, well, it's okay.
What do I do about that?
You just let it go.
Okay.
And the thing is, what's fascinating to me, and what I like to expose about John Simon, is that the idea that you eventually decided to make a couple of albums that are kind of under the radar, and I wanted to play a track off one of them right now, because it has had a massive impact on my daughters and myself. So let's just listen to it and we'll come back, okay?
Yeah, sure.
When morning comes to wake me, and the curtains dance and glow, I know I'm living in a land of sunshine. No inclinations to go. first breath of morning, what a fine spring morning, and it warms me so. I know I'm living in a land of sunshine, got no inclinations to go. My friends say, won't you come and visit? You know your house won't float away, no it won't. But you know I'd surely miss it. So it's here I'm gonna stay, here I'm gonna stay, here I'm gonna stay, here I'm gonna stay, yeah, yeah. Night comes in so softly, the breeze is warm and low. I'm living in a land of sunshine, I got no inclination to go. I'm living in a land of sunshine, I got no inclination to go. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
And that is the classic example of why drum tracks are terrible. Because when you look at Dennis Whitted and Dave Holland, those guys, they swung that song so hard.
Yeah,
and
right.
that is, I would play because Dave Sanborn's solo is incredible. It just keeps going on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
But I stumbled across this record and it has really been a profound record for me, and I love the lyrics. And I must ask you, were you just kind of were you just a hobbit in your house, like just hanging out and living in a land of sunshine? Where did that come from?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of summertime and warm weather and everything, and I just that's where it came from. I can't. Let's see. It's pretty much genuine. It's just what it says. It's not a deep song in any way. It isn't. No.
What did you think about the? How did you put together? I assume that you knew Bergeron and Brecker and and those guys from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And so you...
Well, I didn't know Dave Bargeron from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I knew him from Gil Evans' band, but I did know Randy from Blood, Sweat, and Tears, sure. You know, I mean, when I hear a good player that I want to work with again, I'll make every effort to work with them again when the opportunity comes up. I did an album for the Japanese based on a Hoagie Carmichael song called Hoagie Land, and I think that was the album. Yeah, I think so. No, it's a different album. It's Earth Martinez, it's the second album, sorry. And I needed a certain kind of trumpet player, and I remember there was this guy who played on an album I did with A.J. Croce, Jim Croce's son, who lived in San Diego. And so I called him up and said, hey, would you feel like flying into New York for a bunch of album sessions? And he said, sure. So he was a trumpet player, and he came, Mitch Manker, he came all the way to New York City just to play. When I could have gotten anybody out of New York City, but it was just something about his tone and working with people too. You know, when you work with people, you've worked with before. It's just easier the second time, like that.
Yeah, no, and just to read off some of the other songs: Slim Pickens in the Kitchen, Poems to Eat, Big City Traffic Jam. It just, to me, this is just. And then in the inside gatefold cover I have this like wall-sized poster of these really interesting drawings. Is this your artwork as well?
No, it's Gene Gregan's artwork. It says Zen taming the bull or taming the ox taming series. It says, so that's a very classical, famous series that Zen Buddhist painters do, and in different whatever their take on it is, Oh. But you talk about musicians. On that cut you just played of Living in a Land of Sunshine, the clarinet player is my friend Dave Poe from high school.
Wow.
So when I hear a good player, I just try to get him back.
Do you think that this is kind of an abstract question, but part of my thesis is that there was a searching, you can talk about the transcendental meditation that the Beatles popularized and the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi brought, and Emil Richards and John Densmore was going on. And you mentioned the Zen, this poster. Were people more in touch with or searching for consciousness during the early 70s?
No, they're certainly doing that now, aren't they? They really are. I mean, there's such a surge in enlightenment today. It started in the '60s. It's a '60s phenomenon, but it certainly has not diminished. It's really with us now. If you look in any of those magazines, like the Woodstock newspaper, for instance, you'll find therapists of every stripe, or a magazine like Shambhala's Sun or something like that. There are just tons of people interested in exploring their inner life or whatever,
Well, I mean specifically within the music, especially because we talk about the.
Well, I don't know that because I don't listen to music.
Right.
See?
Exactly. Me neither. I was going to say. Billy Mundy, I just found another record from him today. Where is this cat? Do you have?
I haven't seen Billy in years. I don't even know. I don't know anything about Billy these days. He was with the Mothers of Invention for a while, then he moved to Woodstock, and he, played with some of the bands that passed through Woodstock and lived there for a while. Yeah.
There was one other album that John Simon was involved with during when he made Journey. And we're going to listen to that, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Hey here, hey there, hey you. I've got some proof it's really so. Peace on earth, goodwill to men, and somewhere, somehow, something's gonna blow. Let it blow now, now, now. Your face is red. Be careful, you hurt your head and wind up dead. Like the world has lost its ears and eyes. Is it wise to sympathize when harmony has been kicked in the knee? And sour notes are singing the sad, sad song. People want to go on home.
I was, even before you mentioned it to me in that email, I was going to use this song, but I wish that solo kept going. The fade out bothers me.
Oh well.
How did that come about? Did Seals and Crofts covet you, or how did that?
I was assigned. I would just get assignments from record companies. So like Ron Goldstein, who was at Warner Brothers Records at the time, said, "How about producing this band, Seals and Crofts?" No, actually, this came. They were on a different label. They were on Talent Associates.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Which was David Suskind's label, and they came through my manager. I had a manager at the time who said, listen to these guys. You want to produce them, they want you to produce them. So, and they're very talented, you guys. They were originally the Champs before they were Seals and Crofts.
I didn't know that.
That was them.
So as a producer coming in, are you responsible for bringing in the Harvey Brookses and the Jim Ralstons and the Paul Harrises to put them around, or is that part of the producer's job?
It depends. Yeah, I mean, the producer's job is to do whatever it takes to get a record done, basically.
That is a very diverse album too, because it goes from bluegrass, country. There's some up tempo. When I listen to this stuff, and I'm thinking, what kind of imprint did he have from the music point of view? Because some of the bridges, some of would there be a time where there'd be tunes where?
Listen, I'm not gonna dictate to somebody and say you should make it be this way. It's their album, it's their songs, so you're not going to find much of my musical imprint on things that I produced. It's just not. Like I say, I vetted them all. They all went through me, and sometimes I might suggest a chord here or something like that there. But generally speaking, it's somebody else's album. It's not the producer's album, unless you get to people like Phil Spector, who want to put their print on an album, and that's what they're known for. But that's not what I ever did.
Do you for these upcoming shows, especially the one at Joe's Pub, I mean, can we expect to hear some stuff possibly off your first album or Journey? Or
yeah, you will. You'll hear a couple things off my first album. Maybe I'm trying to think of anything off of Journey. I can't recall exactly what I'm doing now, what albums they're all off of, but sure, I'm going to do maybe a dozen songs from my first album to the very recent.
And is it going to be? I haven't been there before, but is it going to be just? Are you playing with your trio, or is it just you?
No, I'm just going to play by myself.
How does that? So how do you feel about solo playing?
It's not as easy as playing with somebody else. It's harder than doing it with other people.
Right.
That's how I feel about it. But it's all fun, I'll play for anybody. I really like to be appreciated like anybody who's makes something, whether it's a birdhouse or a song. You like to be appreciated for what you do. So that's what I'm going to do.
One final question for you, Mr. Simon, is...
Please don't call me Mr. Simon.
John, I'm sorry. One more question for you, John.
Mr. Feinberg.
Yes, thank you. Don't call me Mr. Feinberg. No, Dr. John, I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned that in the rehearsals for The Last Waltz, there was some pretty incredible music that was, and I'm curious as if to know if those rehearsal sessions were ever recorded.
I heard that they were. Somebody on the local radio station down here in the Florida Keys, somebody told me that they heard a Dr. John rehearsal for The Last Waltz. Now, I didn't even know anybody had anything running.
I mean, you had to believe that the engineers were cogent enough to say we got to get all this stuff out. I guess
there were no engineers, kiddo. There were no engineers. There was no recording session done until the actual the concert itself. We rehearsed at Shangri-La, and then the day before it, we had our dress rehearsal of everybody in Winterland, wherever it was. But I don't think that dress rehearsal was recorded. Maybe Elliot Mazer, who was in the truck doing the remote recording, was testing some of the equipment at the time, but I don't think so. So, maybe that's where it came from. I'll have to call Elliot and ask him.
Yeah, you'll have to, because we just, my engineer and I, assume that you might be sitting on those tapes.
No, God, no. I don't have any memorabilia at all. I was asking me, do you have any tapes? Do you have any photos? No, I don't.
John, it was. I got to tell you, when my friends come up to you with Jake Feinberg tote bags and things like that, please sign them. And
oh yeah. And
I
hope they come up and say hello.
And I really I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that these are satisfying shows for you. And someday I hope to come up to Ulster County and see you in Ellenville because, like I said, Elizaville has meant a lot to me personally. And
our eggs come from Elizaville. They do. It's some farm in Elizaville. Listen, are you in Tucson?
That's right.
You are?
Yes, sir.
Maybe I'll come back there again. I once played a solo show in Tucson at a little club. This is in the early '90s on the south side of town. That was sort of half outdoors, half indoors. I don't know if that club is still there.
We need a name. Yeah, no.
It was a jazz club, and I know that Terrence Blanchard came in the week before me. I remember that. That's all I can remember about the club.
Well, we'll do our best to get you down here, John. But I wanted to thank you for taking the time, and best of luck to you, and thanks for all your illuminating information for today.
It was easy, Jake. Anytime.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Get easy. Bye.
All right. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you all in a little bit.